I have noticed that a lot of people, myself included, seem to really struggle with confrontation. And conflict isn't always a bad thing, but it feels bad. And the reason it feels bad usually has something to do with our childhoods or a really toxic relationship that we were in at some point, and we learn to be afraid of someone's mood shift. And so when someone starts to be agitated or displeased or upset, it can really derail our sense of security and safety, whether or not they mean any bad intentions. There can be like this overreaction in our nervous system of, oh no, danger, because this person is not happy. Their not happiness feels aggressive. It feels dangerous. It feels like you're on the edge of something, and that precipice, it's not comfortable at all. But the reality is that conflict and confrontation come up a lot. If you can't deal with facing them, you end up with really negative habits. You close yourself off to people, or else you start fawning over everyone and being ridiculously accommodating. A peacekeeper. You're constantly trying to keep the peace, trying to make everyone stay happy, because if they stay happy, then you're not terrified. If you close yourself off, you just shove everyone away, because if they're not near you, then you don't run the risk of them getting unhappy and you being terrified. I have decent confrontation skills when it comes to men, but unfortunately most of my life I was pretty mistreated by women to the point of domestic violence against me. And when a woman in a position of authority is upset, I don't handle it well. I kind of go into a weird autopilot. My brain shuts down a little bit, my emotions shut down a little bit, and I'm basically just temporarily getting through. And when I come out of that, I'm usually not in the best space. I definitely get triggered. Like, I have some pretty serious PTSD. I have hurt people's feelings before when I come out of it. I also have hurt people's feelings before when I'm in that state. I tend to be extremely accommodating most of the time. So when confrontation happens, and it's not even necessarily like aggressive, it's, oh, they're displeased with me. A woman in a position of authority is not happy. I get really confused and I get really distressed. And I either go into an autopilot that's pretty accommodating and just getting through it, or else I go into an autopilot that's really protective, especially if there's other people there. If a woman in a position of authority is displeased with me and say I've got friends around or something, I go into like this weird default and I'm back in my childhood and those are my siblings and I need to take care of protecting them. And I will take blows for them. I am a living shield and I get so protective. And if one of them's not okay while the woman in a position of authority is not okay, I just go full protective. That's not necessarily appropriate, but I can't consciously think to stop myself. By that point, it's too late. I'm already doing it. I try to be honest with people and let them know either beforehand or afterwards, hey, this is what's going on, this is what happened. But sometimes I go so far into being triggered that I start dissociating and I can't even hardly remember what happened. It's like my brain just cannot tolerate having to process that level of danger. It feels like real, absolute danger. The same kind of danger if I was being like a prey and a predator was hunting me. It feels so really, really not okay. And I get super confused. And for whatever reason, I have been told by women who have experienced this that my confusion usually comes across as anger, which is really weird to me because I'm not angry at all. I'm terrified. But it's so intense. My questioning, all I'm actually trying to do is understand what she wants. Because if I know what she wants, I'll just do it. 100%. I will just accommodate. I will just, acquiesce, whatever she wants. I will just do it. I will just want it to be over as quickly as possible. So if she just leads with her expectations, I will comply. But the problem is I can't articulate that well. My brain's not functioning right. It's shut down. And so instead it just comes across as my desperation to figure out what I'm doing wrong, because that's what it feels like. It feels like I've done something egregious and she's about to explode. Whether or not that's true or not, whether or not the woman I'm talking to is someone who I ever think would ever harm anyone, it still becomes this thing that just destroys me temporarily. I've had women in positions of authority be displeased, and it was actually that she was worried about me. Something had happened where she thought, oh no, I might not be okay. And because she was worried about me, it was a displeased emotion, and I could not translate that. And for like 2 days, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, nothing, until we finally, I got up the courage to talk to her about it. Like, I just don't handle it that well. And I'm not really scared of almost anything. You want me to go jump out of an airplane? Sure. You want me to go speak in front of a bunch of people? Sure. I just, near-death situations are not a big deal to me. But I am scared of doctors, and I am scared of women being displeased, and especially women in positions of authority being displeased. It isn't a helpful habit. It doesn't benefit my life. It is a barrier to a lot of things for me. I don't hate women. I actually really have a soft spot for women, despite everything. But it's still just something I have to deal with constantly. I shouldn't say constantly. It's not like it happens all the time. And most of the women in positions of authority in my life, I try, again, to be clear. I think you're awesome, but this could happen. And if it happens, please forgive me. I am not doing it on purpose. It is not intentional. If I could help it, believe me, I would. There is no one more frustrated than me by my own reactions. It is sucky. And I have to do that. I have to be just real with people. And there are definitely some people who take a major step back from me. There are women who they feel completely uncomfortable. And the thing is I try to be really clear. I don't think you're abusive. I don't think you're that way. But my nervous system won't listen to the logic in my brain. It just responds. And I am someone who's done a lot of therapy. I'm someone who's done a lot of counseling. I've done a lot of, work on myself, and I'm still working on myself. It's not like I'm like, okay, well, I give up. I'm still trying. Maybe someday I'll get there. But it's definitely something that sometimes comes up. And I find myself being too quick with certain women to just do whatever they want, do whatever they say. It's not fair for me to expect her to accept the pressure or put some sort of obligation on her to be conscientious of me all the time. Like, that's a lot. Maybe she doesn't even know how I grew up. Like, I don't always tell people, I don't like to make people uncomfortable, and my life makes people uncomfortable. Most people didn't grow up having to survive their childhood. And so, at least in this country. And so it's uncomfortable for people. Yet I have to, with certain women, explain, because I don't want them to feel crappy. I've had women flat out before, because of my reaction, think that I was insinuating that they were a shitty person. And I felt so bad. And all I was actually trying to do was not be confused and ask them not to confront me in public. And I can't even help it, which is the worst part. I try so hard, but there's a certain point where conscious thought just goes out the window. Yet I can't avoid confrontation. The thing is, it's not even just exposure therapy, although that's, a thing that can be helpful. It's that I want to have a life. And if I'm constantly avoiding conflict, if I'm constantly avoiding women, maybe at some point could become enough of a hermit that I could manage that. I could actually accomplish that. But what kind of life would that be? The whole thing about humans is, as much as I like my alone time, we depend on each other and we need human interaction. It's necessary. So I can't just constantly be afraid of it and run away from it and feel bad. I feel so guilty. I hate feeling like I'm a bad person or that I've done something wrong. And in that situation, I always instantaneously blame myself. It doesn't matter who started it. It doesn't matter what happened. It's my fault. I revert back to being that little tiny kid, and everything was always my fault. That's hard. That sucks. That's a horrible feeling. But avoiding confrontation gives like a hollow shell of a life. It's just a path to loneliness and despair. Avoiding confrontation means no interpersonal relationships. It means no sense of intimacy. It means no connection. It's a void. Avoiding leads to a void. And I don't want to have a life that is just a giant void. And so I have to be vulnerable, and I have to dare to try to trust, and I have to not pull away when those things happen. When a confrontation comes up, my instinct is, okay, I need to not bother this person again. I've obviously upset her, and I'm capable of upsetting her, so I need to just stay away from her now. I have to resist that, and I have to go back, apologize, and then act like nothing happened and that we're still on good terms with each other, even though I am scared of her having a change in reaction. And sometimes at first, especially at first, she pulls away too. It's not like she's thrilled for us to go back to being pals. You know, I've definitely had women in positions of authority who were capable of that, but some women in positions of authority, you know, it makes them lose some trust too. It's like, oh, this whole time you acted like this person that I like and I'm fine with, and then out of nowhere, all of a sudden, you were like someone else, and that was scary for me. I can understand how she would feel that way. I absolutely can understand, because I would feel the same way. If someone was very consistent and always the same way, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere, they started acting really different, and it was super intense, yeah, that would throw me off too. So I don't begrudge any woman who feels that way, but I still have to treat her like she is a good person, and that it can be safe for us to talk again, that we can be on good terms, we can be friendly and amicable with each other. Because if I don't, then I'll just start running away all the time. And I don't want to live a life that's like that. And it's scary. It can take a couple of months to even get to a point where we can have a conversation again. And yet I have to keep showing up. It takes a lot of willpower and self-discipline to do it, but consistency really makes a huge difference. And so I can't avoid confrontation. And the biggest thing about these confrontations or conflicts, especially with women in positions of authority, is once it happens, sometimes it's beyond repair. Once it happens, she's done. And that sucks. But sometimes once it happens, we move on to have richer dialogue from that point on. Maybe before, when I brought up, oh, hey, I don't always handle women being upset very well, they didn't take it very seriously. They thought I was just sort of saying stuff. Maybe they thought I was trying to be like a feminist or something and be like respectful of them. You know, oh, hey, you know, I hope you're never displeased with me because, you know, I don't always handle it the best, and I'd much rather just us be on the same page, and, you know, that never happened. And they think, oh, he's trying to be nice, or he's trying to be a good guy, or whatever it is. And then it happens. And then there's a deeper understanding. And they're open sometimes to understanding. Sometimes they're not. Honestly, A lot of times they're not, but sometimes they are. And then you can end up with a really close friendship with someone who you know knows. And part of the fear with confrontation is that terror of her mood's about to shift and I don't know what's going to happen. Anything could happen. She could go full-blown ballistic and violent, and I won't know until it's happening. Once you've experienced it with her once, and she doesn't do that, and you can come back to a place where you can talk to each other again, even if it's not like an, sexual relationship. It's not a romantic relationship. It's just her and me being friends, or being, maybe a mentor or a boss or whoever it is. It's not like it has to involve any kind of romance or of any kind. It still can become this really close friendship and relationship because we both have come to a place of accepting that we still care about each other, even though maybe things aren't perfect. And that we know, even at my worst, maybe even at her worst, maybe it was both of our worst, that we were still on each other's side, that we weren't actually against each other. And it takes the terror down. It makes it feel like the next time she's displeased with me, maybe don't panic me, because I panicked before. That didn't really work out. She's going to try to be more conscious. I'm going to try to be more conscious. And the risks of it escalating into something as bad as the first time go way significantly down, because we accept each other. We're just human. We're flawed, and no one can be at their best at all times. It's just not possible. We're not superhuman. And so when dealing with this kind of conflict, the resolution of it creates the very intimacy, the very close personal relationships, the very interactions that is natural for a human to crave. Sometimes the very path to the best relationships is from dealing with conflict and confrontation with them. It's not all the time. There are definitely going to be times that confrontation leads to something very unpleasant, sometimes even illegally unpleasant, but it's not all the time. And the reward is so worthwhile, because it's not just that relationship with her that I get to keep. It's my path in life. It's my embracing life. It's my actually getting to live instead of just surviving on mere scraps of human interaction. There's such a huge importance to understanding that if you're always accommodating and you're always trying to avoid that conflict, you are always following through with everything everyone around you wants. You're always being a pacifist, trying to keep all the peace all the time. You engineer opportunities for conflict when you do that without meaning to. I've certainly done that. I can be extremely accommodating because I'm always trying to make up to everyone around me the way that I am. And I always am trying so hard to be a good enough person that they can forgive me. But the relationships with people get so one-sided. It's hard for them to respect what you're saying. If you say, hey, I have this need, or I have this issue, something comes up, I have this disorder, whatever it is, it's hard for them to respect what you're saying. It's hard for them to fully absorb it because they just expect you to be accommodating and nice anyway. Why wouldn't they assume that? You're always that way. They don't think of you like as an asshole. They think of you as a good person. And then suddenly something comes up and out of nowhere, you're not okay. And they can take that not okayness to mean, whoa, this person suddenly became an asshole. They can feel like it's so out of character that they just lose trust in you completely. The very attempts at avoiding conflict makes the conflict worse. If you are someone who's so guarded and you just don't let people in, and you don't trust anyone, and you don't reach out to anyone, and you just keep people at a distance at all times, then when all of a sudden you're in a vulnerable place, they're going to be scared to try to help you. They're going to be scared to try to reach out to you because you've been so rigid and abrasive the whole time that they're worried about how you're going to treat them. And they might actually care. They might actually want to help you, but you're your own wall between them and you. Avoiding conflict actually creates worse conflict when the conflicts happen. And if you can take conflict in little mini baby doses, in little, oh, in this conversation we had a disagreement, we talked it out. That's so much better than I am full-blown triggered, my PTSD is like off the charts, I am in panic and everything's exploding now. The small micro doses of conflict are so uncomfortable, but they're so much less escalated. If you wait such long times between confrontations, the confrontations just will often be so huge because you can't handle them. You haven't been creating a habit for yourself of addressing it. So be honest with the people in your life, be honest with yourself, and just say, self, we got to do this. We got to work through this, and give it to yourself in as small of doses as you can, because it's not really possible to avoid bad things happening. Even if you became a little hermit in the woods, life is still going to happen. At some point, you're going to get ill or injured, or there's going to be a natural disaster. There's going to be something that happens, and you're still going to have to deal with a hard time. And most likely, people will end up involved. And then you're going to have to deal with the people while having a hard time. You're just setting yourself up for failure by avoiding it. You're creating more chances that it will go poorly. And that's really hard to deal with. That's so hard to confront when you are so anxious. It is so awkward and uncomfortable to start. But what kind of life are you living if you don't start? It's inevitable. You're not actually keeping conflict away. You're just making it less frequent, but more horrifying.